Hi guys, Yuki here, back with Seduce Me to the Demon War. So, we finished up Damien's route, and so I guess we're now moving on to James's route, but since the beginning, hour or so, was basically just the same intro that you saw in the demo, I'm just gonna skip past that, and if you'd like to go look at it, you can just look at the video that I posted 6 months ago or so, for James's route. And I've done the exact same choices in this one. With Damien, I went the wrong direction, so I ended up seeing Sarah and Diana, which didn't happen in the previous part, which is why I put that in the video last time. But anyways, let's just load the game where I left it. Oh my gosh, I'll be back then since nobody ever... Alright, sorry for... You know what? This is just gonna be a daily thing, just so apologies in advance, I guess. No sense of privacy. So yeah, I'm just gonna speed it up to the part where it ended in the demo, where the guys show up, and yeah, we'll take it from there. The question was, how? As the sight of the boys kept the demon's attention, a second tear opened above them, causing everyone to look up. 4 women dropped down from the tear and somehow managed to fall into the arms of the incubi behind James.
Whoa!
I gotcha! Whoa! Are you okay?
It's okay, mate. It's okay. Everybody. It's hard seeing Damien with somebody other than myself.
I gotcha! It's okay!
Eric!
Love, I've got you!
I stared wide-eyed. Their wives came too? I watched as the boys and the girls finally planted themselves on the ground before looking around. As James spotted me, however, he quickly rushed over.
Love!
James! To my surprise, Diana quickly moved out of the way, allowing me to approach and wrap his arms around me. The feeling of his body against mine sent a shiver up my spine. He was really here. I instantly wrapped my arms around his body, burying my face in his shoulder and taking in his scent. His head gently nuzzled into my shoulder as James curled over to bring my body close to him.
Thank God you're safe.
You came for me. I could barely believe it, but I did. The scent of his cologne and the texture of his clothing let me know that I wasn't dreaming. He came to find me. Now the question was, how would we both leave? James gently loosened his embrace and looked at Diana, who was standing by her side and watching. I couldn't see his expression, but Diana stared wide-eyed, almost in fear of James. Why? As James began to speak, I felt some sort of violent power charge in the room. While Diana held dominance before the incubi had arrived, it was practically ripped from her as James claimed me once again in his arms.
Care to explain why my bride is here, Diana?
Your father.
I looked up at James to see him staring Diana down, as if he didn't believe her explanation. Tighten the hug? I tightened the hug around his chest, earning a soft squeeze from him in return, but he continued to glare at Diana.
And why have you not sent her back?
Again, your father.
I watched as James's eyes closed further, almost hiding his whiskey brown irises in an unimpressed and unconvinced glare.
As much as I despise my father, why do I have a hard time believing that?
From beside Diana, the spirit guard stepped up and crossed his spear across Diana's body in an act of protection. He seemed unfazed by James's glare and almost felt like he was challenging him from the power play, thrashing in the air. It was like James and Diana were opposing alphas and the guard was a protective mate. I guess that makes sense.
Believe what you will. My lady was about to send her back before you came.
James looked up to the guard and visibly sized him up. The guard glared, tightening his grip on his spear, but remained beside his mistress. As James looked back to Diana, his hold on to me tightened. Is it cool? Diana sighed softly and placed a hand on the guard's shoulder, looking at him, but the guard refused to turn himself or his spear away from me and James.
He cast a curse on your bride-to-be, barring her from leaving this world alive.
A curse?
Yes. She can't leave this world unless she dies, or until we kill the Demon Lord.
I could feel James's arms tense around me. For some reason, the look in his eyes changed from anger to almost hopefulness. Was he hoping that we would be able to leave? I hope so.
Now, I must ask that you recognize whose kindness you are testing.
Seto.
Diana tightened her hand on her guard's shoulder, almost digging her nails into his jacket. However, her eyes remained on James, now submissive to his dominant stare on her.
We have been fighting him consistently and have successfully pinned him into a corner. Our next attack will be on the Demon Lord's castle, and it will be the final battle.
Succubus, if I may...
No, you may not.
The lanky man stared wide at Diana, but she ignored him. Instead, she continued to stare up at James and phased out her harsh tone towards her companion. James eventually released me from his embrace and faced Diana and her guard, standing tall and almost looking down his nose at them.
And when do you plan to attack him?
With a nasty snarl, the larger demon male stepped forward and glared hard at James. I felt my body tense in reflex, but James just continued to stand tall.
Why the fuck should we tell you?
1 week's time.
Everyone in the room shot their heads towards Diana, mostly in shock or surprise.
What? 1 week?
I looked to Diana, watching her unable to turn away from James's gaze. She wasn't entranced, but it seemed as if she wasn't able to even pull away from the gaze battle between them out of fear.
Where is this number coming from, Succubus?
We need to fully prepare ourselves for the final stage, which I'm certain will only take a couple of days. We've pinned him into a corner. The Demon Lord will fall.
That's rather bold to assume.
She's right, though. We can prepare everything in that time frame, right?
And if he does the same and attacks us before then?
He won't.
I watched as Diana walked over and cleared the table of the materials they had gathered for the gate spell, revealing a physical map of the Abyssal Plains. She pointed to a spot on the map, a peninsula surrounded by water labeled as the Decaying Sea.
We'll cast a barrier spell along the edge of the peninsula and around the castle. He and his army won't be able to move from that spot until we break it ourselves, which will be during the siege.
Where would we get the energy needed for that kind of spell?
We won't be using energy.
The other rebel demons in the room suddenly tensed up, staring at Diana in surprise. What was she going to do?
My lady, you're not suggesting...
The Demon Lord has shown how far he is willing to go to win this war. It's only fitting to show the extent we'll go to in response.
As much as I agree with you, this seems a little rash.
What are you guys talking about?
Are they allowed to know?
I plan to put a barrier curse around the Demon Lord's castle and army. It's temporary, so it won't need the blood of 1,000 demons. But it will need the sacrifice of at least one demon life.
And I assume you'll be sacrificing one of my soldiers.
Is this our only option?
There are other options, but they will most likely take a lot of energy to pull off.
It just depends on what we want to do. If we want to do this immediately, then the barrier curse is indeed the best option.
I'm not opposed to performing the curse. As rash as it is, it will make our lives easier in the long run.
You expect me to hand over one of my men? My soldiers joined the rebellion to kill the Demon Lord, not to get their throats slit before even seeing the final battle?
It's wrong, but can we really afford to spend any more energy? Diana already spent a lot trying to send the human back.
What is the other option?
The rabbit woman and the fairy moved towards the map and pointed at the peninsula.
We could form tall rock walls around the castle. Box him in.
It will take a lot of our energy, but we can recover in that week period.
And what will stop the Demon Lord from tearing down the walls?
I can imbue the walls with holy magic.
The Incubian looked at him, all of us equally surprised. A demon with holy magic? How?
How the fuck did you get holy magic? You look and smell like a demon.
The guard held up his wrapped hand, letting the beads around it dangle with a sudden motion.
I've had the ability to use holy magic ever since I was taken in by my lady's family. There's no doubt that I am a demon, but I can't recall how I gained this ability.
How is holy magic different than demon magic?
It's white magic. Unlike demon magic, holy magic isn't so finicky. Think of it as warding or dispelling magic. You can't bless air or anything that doesn't have physical form, but you can bless objects to fight back against other forms of magic.
If the walls were blessed with holy magic, the Demon Lord wouldn't be able to escape until we released him.
Why not just trap him forever?
That's idiotic.
He's right.
Oops.
We wouldn't be able to keep the walls up forever.
The situation became more and more complicated the more we discussed it. How are we going to go about this?
We can't just sit around and debate this forever. The longer we wait, the more we risk him striking back at us.
But is it worth killing someone to trap him?
When we finally strike, we will lose hundreds, if not thousands, of soldiers anyway. What difference will it make to lose one more life on top of this?
Soulless fuck.
We can still cage him in.
I bit my lip. It was a really tough decision. A curse or a trap? Which was better? Both had their prices, but we had to choose one. From the look of it, no one would want to speak up, so I felt the urge to say something. Maybe I would be the one who determined everything. But which method would be the best choice? I'm gonna keep saying the trap until I'm thinking if I choose curse, it's gonna come back and bite me in the butt. So, no. I say the trap. Everyone in the room looked at me as I finally spoke up. We needed to be better than the Demon Lord. He was willing to sacrifice lives to trap me here, but it only showed how desperate he was to win and how little he valued life. He would lose this war one way or another. It wasn't worth losing someone who could help turn the tide of war. When can you put up a barrier?
We can leave after this, meeting is over.
Are you sure this is the best choice?
The curse isn't the only option. We need to show that we're better than him. Everyone nodded, and some in reluctance, while the others did with confidence. I looked at Diana just in time to catch a twitch from her visible eye, but she shook her head and looked to the rabbit woman.
Are you quite positive this will work?
I am very certain. Since it will be just 3 of us going, we can shadow travel there and be back by the morning.
Diana looked at her guard and nodded.
Very well. If you believe it will work, then I trust you will make sure it does.
As the guard nodded and slightly bowed, the other demons seemed to let out a sigh of relief. Were they worried about performing the curse? Diana shook her head before crossing her arms and looking directly at me.
So, since you'll be here for a while, we might as well give you names that you can use to refer to everyone here.
Are we getting human names?
Must we?
Diana rolled her eyes and gestured to each demon, naming them on the fly.
For the sake of time, we'll use simple names. This is Rabbit, our magic advisor, Sergeant, commander of our armies, Shadow, leader of our assassins, and Faye, our nomadic force ambassador.
Sergeant, I'm a commander, succubus. Shouldn't my name be Commander?
It's easier on the tongue, though, to say Sergeant.
My lady, what shall they call me?
Diana looked at Sarah for a moment before turning towards me, the look of seriousness emanating from her eyes.
You may call him Zero. He is my personal guard, and he is always by my side.
The other demons and Sarah seemed to be surprised. Was Sarah his true demon name? Why would she give me his true name?
Are you sure?
Call him only if your life depends on it. Do not abuse this permission.
Her eyes seemed to burn as she gazed into mine, full of hard intent and warning. I mentally noted her seriousness as she ran a hand through her hair.
Well, now that we have a plan and introductions are out of the way, I believe we can end this meeting. We have a lot to accomplish in 1 week.
What about us? You don't expect us to sit around.
Actually, I do. You all don't belong on the battlefield.
Wait, hold on. That's not fair.
I will not take untrained and unarmed beings into a war zone.
Hold on! I interjected, stepping forward and crossing my arms at Diana. She seriously wasn't going to make us stay back while she fought the Demon Lord, was she? I'm gonna keep doing the most part the same thing. and then I'll do the other ones when I get to it. We can fight too. Diana squinted at me, pressing her lips together in a fine line. However, I meant what I said. We could fight too.
You expect me to trust that you can fight in a war?
Let me and my brothers train then. We're demons, for fuck's sake. We know how to fight.
The boys stared at Diana as she turned her head towards Sam. He was right, though. They knew how to train so that they could fight. If they fought with the rebellion, there would be a better chance of winning this war.
You all realize this is a war, correct? You can die here.
We understand completely.
We do too, Diana.
Diana could only stare at our group as we challenged her proclamation. I wrapped my hand around my fiancé's arm, frightened at the idea of participating in a war, but knowing that we needed all the strength we could muster to finish off the Demon Lord. This was the only way that I could go home. Defeated, Diana sighed and rubbed her temples.
Very well. I can't exactly keep you here like prisoners, so it will be up to you if you choose to train for battle. However, I highly suggest just staying here and allowing us to handle it.
I nodded, as did the others. This was really happening. We were going to kill the Demon Lord, and we had 1 week to either prepare for war or wait it out. Diana turned towards me and looked down at my outfit. I had nearly forgotten that I was still in my wedding dress until Diana pointed at my chest.
Lumen infere, bellum tabescere, serene.
I stared at her, unsure of why she was speaking in Latin, until I felt the fabric around my body shift and change. I quickly looked down to see my wedding dress morph into an outfit that looked perfect for the demon world. The white top shifted into a long-sleeved, oversized tunic with a leather corset and vest, while the bottom part of the gown split and wrapped around my legs, forming into dark leggings. My shoes stretched into long knee-high boots.
Wow, that's so cool!
I blushed, getting used to the feeling of the outfit. The corset wasn't tight, but it was still something new along with the rest of the garb. James, however, smiled down at me and kissed over my forehead.
We'll save the wedding dress for when we return.
Oops. Right.
Faye, Rabbit, you both should finish your preparations and head over to the Demon Lord's castle for the spell.
How are you going to get there?
I'll get us there, no problem.
Just make sure we don't get stuck there or lost.
No promises!
Zero, make sure the job is done.
I shall, my lady.
Sarah, Faye, and Rabbit began to make their way out of the room as Diana turned to me and my group. As they left, Diana let out a small sigh.
I will take you to some rooms you may rest in.
Oh, that's Sam saying thanks. Yeah, thank you, Diana. Diana merely nodded and led our group out of the room towards her new temporary rooms. This was completely crazy. I was stuck in the demon world with the man I loved, and I had to wait until the war was over to even consider going home. I held James's hand tightly as we walked through the halls of the castle, now worried and remembering my nightmare once again. I began to feel nervous, nauseous even. There were so many things wrong about this, and there was even more things that could go wrong with this plan. Kill the Demon Lord? It sounded so simple, but this war had been going on for a while. Who truly knew if this was the final battle? James most likely felt the nervousness in my hand as he gave it a gentle squeeze, catching my attention and breaking my thoughts.
Are you okay?
No! I couldn't lie to him. I was worried about this whole ordeal. Add on to the fact that we were in the demon world where James came from, and my worries increased tenfold. James gently squeezed my hand, leaning over to kiss my head gently.
Everything will be all right. We'll get back home soon enough.
I know, but... James looked to me, staring at me with worry of his own.
Are you worried about your nightmare?
I nodded. The nightmare had mildly plagued me, reminding me that what things James could potentially do. I knew it wasn't their truth, but a part of me became fearful if it honestly became the case. James furrowed his eyebrows slightly before releasing my hand and wrapping it beneath his arm, walking with me with it like a gentleman.
Whatever happens, I promise that no one will hurt you.
I squeezed James's arm, believing him at least for now. It was comforting to know that he was going to protect me and help me through this. We continued down the hall, led by our guide towards our room. The others were given rooms apparently on the opposite end of the castle, while James and I claimed the ambassador's room I'd stayed in the night before. At least it was a room I was familiar with. At We began to space out, imagining what was going to happen. We would kill the Demon Lord, break the curse on me, and go home to be married. That was the plan, but what if we couldn't kill him? What if he was more powerful than we thought? James, however, gently nudged me, catching my attention and breaking me from my thoughts.
Did you know that time works differently between the human and demon worlds?
I could tell that he was trying to calm me down with something else to keep my mind on. I became curious as to what he meant. Time works differently here?
Indeed. In this world, time moves slower. What would take a day to grow in the human world would take 5 days here.
Oh. I was astonished. Time was that different? I began to wonder how long I had been gone from, if it was the case. As if James read my mind, he smiled at me.
You were gone for about 5 hours before we found you.
5 hours? I had been in the demon world for an entire day, but back home I hadn't even been gone that long. It made no sense at all, but James continued to speak as I stared in shock.
When you didn't arrive at the hall, we sent everyone home and used our powers to make sure no one would be suspicious. Once everyone left, we tracked you down and came here to find you.
I nodded in reply, taking in the explanation. It was crazy to think that about, but I guess that made sense. My mind wanted to fight it, but I had to remember. This is a new world filled with its own rules, so human logic didn't necessarily apply here. We finally arrived in our room, and we were left alone for the night. I sat down on the bed, feeling the exhaustion of the day take over as James examined the room carefully. He walked around the room, observing each bit of decor with a curious care.
So this is Lilith Castle.
I raised an eyebrow. This place had a name? Lilith Castle? James nodded, walking over to the tapestry on the wall, examining it as he explained.
This castle was the home of the first succubus, Lilith. Demons of Lilith like myself and my brothers come from one of thousands of branches of her bloodline, but we're not pure-blooded incubi. Diana, however, is a pure-blooded succubus, directly descended from Lilith herself.
My dream flashed before my eyes, reminding me of Diana's words towards James. I nodded in understanding as he continued with a small smile.
That's why her family was able to convince the Demon Lord to make her my betrothed. They were extremely powerful and could easily charm others, being of pure Lilith blood.
I can only imagine it. Remembering how Diana controlled an entire school like it was easy for her sent a small shiver down my spine. If she was that powerful, then how powerful was she now after so long? James chuckled a bit, breaking my thoughts.
Of course, you know what happened after that.
James finally walked over and sat beside me, softly wrapping an arm around my waist and bringing me close to him. I nuzzled his shoulder, enjoying the warmth of his body. I remember clearly what happened. James chose me, after all, and I chose him. We loved each other and defied Diana's attempts to take him away from me because of it. I couldn't have been more proud of myself at the moment in time. James leaned down a bit and whispered in my ear, making me shiver slightly in his arms.
Besides, the woman I'm engaged to now is more amazing than any princess in all of the 5 worlds.
I blushed at his words, feeling my heart skip a beat. James really did love me. Kiss him? He was so sweet and caring, I felt blessed being able to be with him, both of his fiancée and physically in the same world. My worries began to slowly break apart and melt in my chest as I looked up at him and leaned in, capturing his lips with my own. James seemed surprised for a moment before he let out a soft groan to escape his lips and kissed me back. He gently pressed a hand on the back of my head, keeping me close as we kissed each other lovingly. It was almost orgasmic the way his lips moved against mine. As we slowly pulled away from each other, letting our breaths intermingle in the space between us, James smiled. I became lost in his whiskey brown eyes, wanting so much to forever be entranced by them. Actually, I should check how long I've been recording for. Oh, not that long, actually. Huh.
Come, let's get some sleep. We have a lot to do tomorrow.
I nodded, and both of us settled into the bed, drifting into sleep as our heads hit the pillows. I felt at peace, knowing that James was by my side. But my peace didn't last. Ah, no. It's an angel. What the? I felt the void around me shift and brighten to a blinding white, causing me to shut my eyes. Feathers gently brushed against my skin, and I lurched and squirmed away from them instinctively. What was happening to me? I am not going to get baptized by this angel thing. I do not want to lose my memories. No!
Non li technique!
Diana's voice echoed through the air, surprising me and causing me to look around. As I turned my head to look behind her, a pair of arms wrapped themselves around me and held me close. What?
Don't struggle.
Oh. Seiro?
Et hic habet potestatum, adoro teut non exiturum.
E credere de loco isto. Silentium medium vetor.
I became lost in what was happening. Nothing was making sense, but I knew that they were speaking in some form of Latin. The voices that weren't Diana and Sarah, however, struck fear in my core with each word they spoke.
Zero! End this!
On Diana's command, Sarah cast some sort of spell, causing his body and mind to become enveloped in gold light. I felt every nerve in my body heat up almost uncomfortably, making me swarm slightly in Sarah's arms. Sarah, however, tightened his hold on me and continued casting his spell. At last, the world around me suddenly went dark, and I found myself shooting up in bed, awake. Gah!
Love?
I looked to my side to see James, shaken awake by my sudden outburst. His eyes were glossed over from exhaustion, but he continued to watch me with worry. This was the second time I woke up like this. Damn it!
Why are angels hunting you?
James and I suddenly shot our heads towards the sound of Diana's voice, seeing her and Sarah by the door. She had her arms crossed and a look of pure irritation on her face as she awaited my answer. However, I didn't know what to say. Angels were hunting me? I stared at Diana, confused as what she meant. James sat up at last, matching her expression with irritation of his own.
What are you talking about?
I wasn't speaking to you, James.
My eyes widened at the slip. Did she almost say James's real name? Diana growled and clicked her teeth together before looking to me again, glaring harder.
Your dream almost allowed them to erase your memories.
My body chilled at the thought. What the hell? I was confused and fearful of what was going on. What was happening? Why were angels after me? James wrapped his arm around me, seeing me visibly shaken at Diana's words.
Explain, Diana.
Ask your fiancée why she's targeted by them. Don't ask me. I want to know as well.
I don't know. I truly didn't know. What could I say? This was the first time I had heard of angels hunting me. The dream was not a dream I had ever experienced before.
Angels don't target just anyone. They have to have a reason for hunting people down to erase their memories.
Especially when their target is in the demon world.
I held my head and shook it, trying to figure it out. Did I do something wrong? What did I do to incur the wrath of angels? Diana sighed and rubbed her temple.
Well, they've been expelled from the castle for now. For how long? Who knows? However, we need to figure out why they are trying to take your memories away.
Looking up at last at Diana, I could tell that this was a serious situation. Sarah looked at the floor, exhausted from casting the spell to expel them himself. Diana growled beneath her teeth as she looked at the wall.
Another problem. Great. Can this war be any more irritating?
I felt myself curl up into myself a bit at Diana's irritation. I was already a problem that she was going to help solve, and now there was a second problem on top of that? James hugged me gently against his chest comfortingly, feeling me shirk back away from Diana.
Is that all?
From the tone of James's voice, he wanted Diana to leave immediately. Diana looked over and stared at James, a flush of slight fear in her eyes, before her face hardened to a cold glare.
No. Whatever you are doing to try and make me fear you needs to stop.
I don't know what you are talking about.
Say what you will, but I can recognize fear enthrallment anywhere. Thank your father for that.
I looked at James, seeing him glare at Diana, while Diana simply glared back. When my eyes trailed to Sarah, I could see a form of jealousy burn in his gaze at my fiancé. What was happening? James?
Yes, love?
Diana turned her heel towards Sarah, now furious for some reason. Sarah, seeing his mistress turn, quickly turned as well and opened the door for her.
Sleep. We have work to do tomorrow.
Diana left with Sarah right behind her, closing the door. James's embrace finally relaxed around me and pulled me close. What was that all about?
I don't know.
Truly? James nodded as I turned in his arms to fully observe him. James's face seemed very genuine. Still, something was off and I knew it. It had happened when James arrived and apparently only occurred when Diana was around. It was some sort of power struggle between Diana and James, and he was winning, at least from what I could tell. I shook my head. If James didn't know what was happening, then maybe it was just my imagination. James, however, stared at me with pure concern written all over his expression.
But was Diana right? Are angels after you?
I don't know. I just had a dream that was full of light and feathers, and a look of fear ran through James's face for a moment before he shook his head and returned to his calculated but worried expression. No. I'm so irritated. Nobody ever knocks. Nobody is just like, ugh. I have a sign posted. A look of fear ran across James's face for a moment before he shook his head and returned to his calculated but worried expression. Was Diana correct? What was it? Was it an angel attack and not just some random dream? My memories recalled when I was captured. The voices that appeared in my room before the imps came sounded similar to the ones in my dream. Had they been angels as well? This was crazy. What was going on? First, I'm cursed, then I'm hunted? This is unbelievable in every sense of the word. Nothing made sense, and this entire situation was confusing. What would angels want with me? James shook his head and kissed my forehead.
Well, they're gone now. Let's get some more sleep.
I nodded, wrapping my arms around James and lying back with him. He slowly began to pet my hair, almost like waiting for me to sleep first, before he did. Slowly, I closed my eyes and let the darkness of sleep take over me once again. This time there was no rocky dream. I simply floated in the darkness until I naturally woke up, still in James's arms. I looked up at James's sleeping face, so peaceful and almost happy. His arms around my form made me feel warm and fuzzy inside, causing me to cuddle closer to his body. Unconsciously, James pulled me closer to him, wrapping his arms tighter around me. I could tell he was awake, however. His breathing wasn't slow like it usually was when he slept. James? No response. He was pretending, which made me giggle a bit. Little things like this took my mind off the world and made me forget my troubles, whatever they were. I guess this was the blessing of being in love. I smiled and kissed James's cheek, making his smile grow a bit more. I knew it. I know you're awake.
No, you don't.
I laughed and playfully smacked his upper arm, making him laugh as well, and he opened his eyes to look at me with a loving but tired gaze. I became once again lost in his eyes as he smiled back at me.
Good morning. Did you sleep better?
I nodded, knowing he would be happy to hear it. I was more than happy to say it before circling in his arms and nuzzling his chest. What about you? Did you sleep well? James nodded and ran his hand through his hair, petting me lovingly. You're lying to me.
I did. All I did was dream of you.
A soft blush formed on my cheeks before I looked up at him, seeing him smile down at me.
It's the truth. Would you like to hear?
I let myself nod before I even tried to think about the question. James smirked a bit before wrapping his arms fully around me and leaning to whisper in my ear.
I dreamt that we were on a private island, basking in the sand beneath the sun. The wind was perfect, and you looked absolutely stunning in your swimsuit.
I began to imagine it myself, causing the blush on my face to intensify. As James tightened his hug around me, my body began to heat up on its own from the warmth his body gave me.
Then you pulled me into a kiss, one that I couldn't help but melt into. You kept teasing me until I pinned you down against the sand, and I made you beg for me to kiss you.
Wow. James peppered kisses along my neck, making my body shiver at both the image and his dream, and the feelings of his lips upon my skin. I let out a silent but shaky sigh as James nuzzled my head, opening his mouth to say more. Alas, our moment was broken by a loud knock on our door. Bleh.
Oi! Quit fucking him there! You got food for— Yo! Little shit!
Oh, wow. Wow. Nothing even happened.
Oh, I don't want to imagine that, dude.
We do have food, though. May we come in?
James and I let out a simultaneous sigh. So much for enjoying the moment. This was the misfortune of not being alone. I knew we would eventually have our alone time together, but for now a blush of embarrassment ran across my cheeks in response to Sam's allegation. James smiled and kissed my forehead before lifting his head and sitting up.
Come on in, we just got up.
I stood up as well, right as the door opened in the hallway, revealing James's brothers and their wives with plates of food. Eric and Irene each carried 2 plates and handed the extras to me and James.
Thank you, Eric.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Irene.
My pleasure.
On the plate was food I recognized. Bread, cheese, fruit, and some sort of jerky. I assumed it was safe and something I could stomach. James placed his plate on his lap before looking to the group.
So, training starts today.
Finally! I get to kick some ass!
You kick ass anyway, you dork.
Sam blushed and rubbed his neck before stuffing his face with food, not wanting to say any more. Matthew laughed and nodded.
We know what you mean, dude. We can finally kick that old man's ass!
Not to be the skeptical brother here, but is it possible to become stronger than him in just a week? It's been a while since we've had any encounter involving combat after all.
The power of love?
We'll kill him.
Everyone looked to Damien, seeing his stern and cold expression. I frowned, knowing why Damien was so angered by the Demon Lord, as the bastard son. Damien had been left for dead and only survived thanks to his brothers. Damien had more reason than most to hold a grudge against the Demon Lord. James, however, cleared his throat and looked to Eric.
We won't be fighting him alone. This rebellion will help us and allow us to focus our energy on defeating him.
I've been waiting years to kick his arrogant brute face in.
I think we all have a grudge against him, Sam.
We got this.
I would not be so sure.
Everyone turned to see Sarah in the doorway, leaning against the wall with his arm crossed.
Oh, Sarah, where is...
My mistress had a rough night. She's still recovering from it.
Okay. I grimaced, knowing the reason she had a rough night was because of me. Sarah, however, seemed to be re-energized and somewhat bright-eyed. His gaze landed on James and glared hard, causing my fiancé to straighten up a bit.
None of you know what has happened these past 10 years. None of you know of the Demon Lord's true strength.
Then would you care to enlighten us?
At last, Sarah pushed off of the doorway and walked further into the room, closing the door behind him. He looked at each brother, examining each man before setting his gaze on James again.
The Demon Lord is a madman.
You don't need to tell us that.
No. He was mad before, but he lost his mind completely when my mistress formed the rebellion against him. He's killed thousands by his own hand alone out of pure rage.
Sarah's grip on his spear tightened as something resurfaced in his thoughts, reflected in his glare.
Too many times has my lady faced off against him and almost lost her life in exchange.
Sarah's cold stare rehardened itself on his face as he shook away the thought and looked at Damien, who had a stony expression to match.
What makes you think that you, a band of humanized demons, have any chance of destroying him on your own?
The brothers seemed to glare in unison as Sarah's did the wives. I, however, saw his point. The boys had been in the human world for over 2 years. They had missed so much here and had grown accustomed to life, human life. I had only been here a day and knew that this world was much more ruthless than the human world. Sam stood and marched towards Sarah, standing almost nose to nose with him and giving him a terrifying glare.
What makes you think we can't, prick?
I have seen with my own eyes what the Demon Lord can do in battle.
We had to live with that sack of shit for almost 100 years as his sons. We know more than you ever will.
Sam, that's enough.
No, it's not.
Sam and Sarah continue to glare daggers into each other's soul, anger burning in their eyes without any sign of retreat.
We had to live with the fact that our dad burnt down villages, enslaved people, and stole hundreds of lives day after day, ending his night fucking a woman who was chained to a goddamn bed. What the fuck makes you think that we don't know anything about him?
That's terrible. Damien seemed to flinch at Sam's words, but his anger face remained as Sarah and Sam had their stare down. Sarah, however, remained unfazed.
Like I said, he has completely lost his mind. If he was a monster before, he is Satan himself now. He does more than slaughter and burn villages. He takes prisoners and paints the ground with their blood while howling into the sky.
Dang.
He leads legions of imp demons who do nothing but make sure their victims suffer in agony before making them beg for death. He now takes pleasure not in a bed, but in the screams of millions.
In an act of defiance, Sarah strained his back and almost towered over Sam, gritting his teeth. I bet his parents got killed or something.
If anything, the reason he's as mad as he is now is because you all decided to run, so the blame for this war rests on all your shoulders.
Instantly, Sam's fist met with Sarah's jaw and forced him back towards the door. Sarah slammed into the door and gripped his hand over his mouth, rubbing it in pain.
Sam!
Sam!
Fuck you! Do not blame this fucking war on us!
Sarah wiped his lips of fresh blood and as they began dripping from his mouth and glared, as if the punch wasn't as painful as it looked.
Arrogant mutt! The call of the human world was too tempting for you to ignore. You have forgotten about duty and responsibility.
Dang.
We left because we were tired of the lives we had.
You left the world and everyone in it to become the victim of a madman and a world war. None of you understand what we have even sacrificed to stay alive.
No, we don't. And we never will.
James finally stood from the bed and placed a hand on Sam's shoulder, forcing him to step back. As Sam rejoined Carrie, who wrapped her arms around him in comfort, James looked at Sarah.
But you cannot blame us for wanting to be free.
Sarah, on the other hand, began to laugh. It was a painful laugh, but it was one of full anger.
You have no right to defend yourself, eldest son. Because of you specifically, my mistress's entire world was destroyed.
One moment. I stared wide at Sarah. This was about their betrothal, but James did what was best for him. He and I didn't care about the consequences of our love, but Sarah's painful words made me shake. Sarah's eyes began to burn once again in jealousy at James and rage of his words.
Because of you, the only people she had in this world, her family, was brutally murdered in the most sadistic of ways. The imps painted the walls of the castle nursery in the king and queen's blood, while her unborn baby sister was ripped from the queen's womb and nailed to the wall like a hunting trophy.
Oh my god. I didn't know the details till now. I felt sick to my stomach just imagining it. Despite not wanting to in the first place, the imagery was too much, but Sarah continued without mercy.
Asair had to watch her kingdom burn before her eyes and listen to the screams of her people when she returned from the human world after hunting you all down. It was only after the siege when she saw the fate of her own family.
Sarah finally straightened up. At the sight, he looked powerful and strong, but his eyes burned with anger and rage as he glared at James. For the first time in my life, I saw fear run through James's eyes.
Yet you all claim innocence. You all know nothing of innocence!
Oh my gosh.
Enough settle!
Everyone shot their heads towards Diana's voice to see her standing in the corner of the room, shrouded by shadow. However, I could finally see tears running down her cheeks despite the terrifying anger in her face towards Sarah.
You will not speak of the past again, Sarah. Understood?
Yes. my lady.
Diana finally stepped away from the corridor and stood in front of Sarah and across from James and carrying towards the rogue, tears running down her face.
What's done is done. We can't ever change the past, no matter how desperately we try. What matters now is preparing for the Demon Lord and the final battle.
James nodded. It was a sour note to end on, but Diana's words were the truth. We couldn't linger on pointing fingers and having doubts now. Diana ran a hand through her hair and looked around the room, pressing her lips into a fine line.
So, about all of you participating in the war, you all obviously need to train.
Everyone nodded in agreement to Diana's statement. While we weren't battle ready, we still needed to at least know how to defend ourselves. Diana, however, looked to me.
You, most of all.
Huh? Me? I was suddenly confused. How come I was the odd one out and that had to be ready the most? The last thing I remembered about me training was that Diana was against the idea altogether. Diana sighed and rubbed her temple.
Apparently, there are guidelines to breaking this curse. Not only do we have to kill the Demon Lord, but you have to be nearby when it happens for the curse to even break.
That makes no sense. Where did you learn this?
Shadow. He spent the night trying to find alternative ways to break your curse. Unfortunately, we didn't find anything of the sort, but we found the guidelines to breaking it.
Well, it still makes no sense.
Even while it doesn't, it's still better to be safe than sorry. I don't want to kill him and then still have you stuck here because of an error.
I could only sigh and take it in. So I had to be there when the Demon Lord fell. Great. Diana waved her hand dismissively through the air, breaking my potential thoughts.
Anyway, we can't have you dying on the way there, and we can't monitor you when we're in battle. You should at least know how to defend yourself. That's why we've come up with a solution.
Huh? What solution?
Simple. The other rebel leaders and Sarah have agreed that if you'd like a trainer to enhance your abilities, you can train with one of them.
I stared, seeing Sarah step forward with a nod.
Each of the leaders is proficient in a different area of magic and battle strategy, good enough for self-defense. I can't speak for the others, but I can assure you that with Sarah's skill and training methods, you will be well prepared by the time the siege arrives.
Sarah nodded and bowed to me slightly. While I was flattered at the idea, did I really need a trainer? I knew Taekwondo and I at least knew how to defend myself, a demon or not. Then again, we were in the demon world where magic was the norm. What would the others teach me? Diana ran a hand through her hair, looking to the side as she listed off each leaders and their skills.
Sergeant is a brute demon, bred from a nomadic tribe. He most likely teach you the ways of the brute demon, using your fists and speed to keep you alive. Shadow is, by definition, a shadow demon, so he'd probably teach you about dark magic, light manipulation, and assassination. Rabbit is a wild magic-based animal demon, using her animal-focused energy as her weapon. She'd probably teach you how to do the same. Fae? I am honestly not sure. I know they can change their size and use elemental magic as well, but to be honest, I do not know what they would teach you.
I choose Shadow, since I already was on his path, I guess you could say. Diana nodded. Shadow seemed very intelligent and knew the ins and outs of being sneaky and dodgy. It would definitely help in battle not to get hit and maybe take enemies by surprise. With that, Diana turned her heel and left the room.
Finish eating. Afterwards, you should start training.
Everyone in the room nodded their affirmation as Diana and Sarah left.
Well, it looks like we'll be busy for the next couple of days.
This'll be fun.
Man, training's gonna suck.
It'll be worth it, though.
Damien's right.
After we all finished eating, everyone left to either train or do things on their own. I left to start my own work, determined to be prepared for what was to come. The Demon Lord wasn't going to win. I wouldn't let him. And then, I guess I'll stop here for now, since we've gone this far so far. Yes. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. I mean, I know not much has happened yet, and we didn't get any, new, pictures, things, but most likely next time we will. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!